This video is on our Chapter 8 Homework 1, second semester, Chapter 8 Homework 1, long division homework. So on this, let me just get it set up. So we're going to have x plus 3 into, and when you're doing this, you want to make sure that everything's in descending order. If you're missing a term, you want to make sure that you put a 0x squared or 0x, depending on which one you're missing. In this case, I'm not missing any of them. So I'm going to have x cubed minus 5x squared plus 3x plus 11. And now what we're going to focus on, okay, is we're going to focus on, and let me get this a little fatter here and there. We're going to focus on, well, here, let's choose a better color than that, huh? I'll do this green. We're going to focus on that and that. We're going to focus on the x, which is the lead here, lead term here, and the lead term here. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on. And so as I'm doing this, okay, I am going to be, let me get another color. I am going to ask myself, okay, x times what gets me an x to the third, okay? And so x times x squared. Now, you want to make sure that you line it above your x squared. That way you kind of keep yourself in order. So you know you're going to have two more things you're going to be doing after this. So x squared, and then x squared times x is x to the third. X squared times 3 is 3x squared. And then I'm going to minus. Now, when I'm minusing this whole quantity. So I'm really going to be distributing a negative to everything. So I'm going to make everything opposite. So this is going to become a negative, and this is going to become a negative. Okay. So now I'm going to do the math. And I'm going to have these cancel. These always have to cancel out. You have to get exactly that x to the third. Okay. A negative 5x squared and a negative 3x squared is a negative 8x squared. And then you're going to bring down this next term. So I'm going to bring down my plus 3x. And again, I'm going to focus on this time. Let me see if I can just select this. Okay, so I just made a couple of these little dots I'm going to use just so I can move them around. Okay, so this is now what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to be focusing on my x going into this negative 8x to the second. Okay, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. It's a little bigger, sorry. And so let me do that. So x times what gets me a negative 8x to the second, and that's going to be a negative, oops, I did not change that. Okay, so that is going to be a negative 8x is what that is going to be. So negative 8x times this is going to be a negative 8x to the second. Negative 8x times 3 is a negative 24x. And then I am going to subtract. So that means I'm going to switch the sign. So this becomes a positive and this becomes a positive. Okay, so now this is a positive and positive. And so when I do that math, that's going to cancel out. I get a 3x and a 24x, which is a 27x. I'm going to bring down my plus 11. And again, I'm going to grab one of these. I am going to focus on my 27x. That's what I'm going to focus on. Okay. So now I'm going to go, okay, x times what gets me 27x? It's going to be a 27. So I'm going to multiply 27 times x and get 27x. 27 times 3, which is 81. And then I'm going to subtract. So this is going to become a negative, and this is going to become a negative. So this is going to cancel out, and I have an 11 and a negative 81, which is going to be a negative 70. This is my remainder. So quick note, if they ask you, hey, is x plus 3 a factor of this? No, because we have a remainder that's not 0. Now my answer, I'm going to write all of this. I'm going to write, let me get blue. I'm going to be writing x squared minus 8x plus 27. And then I have a minus 70 over what I was dividing by, which is an x plus 3. And that is going to be our answer. Okay. On number 2, okay, so on this one, a couple things to pay attention to. Okay, let me set it up, x minus 2 into. You'll notice I have an x to the third, but I'm missing an x squared term. So I'm going to put a 0 there. So I'm going to have a 4x cubed plus a 0x squared, and then I have my plus 2x and my minus 18. Okay, and then I'm going to focus again on my leads each time. So I'm going to be focusing on my x and my 4x cubed. That's going to be my focus. Okay, always my lead and the lead over here. So x times what gets me a 4x to the third, and that's going to be a 4x squared. So I'm going to write my 4x squared here, and I'm going to multiply. Okay, 4x squared times x is 4x cubed. And 4x squared times negative 2 is a negative 8x squared. And then I'm going to change my signs. I'm going to use purple this time. So this is going to become, because I'm minusing, so that becomes negative, this becomes positive. And now when I do that math, this cancels out. Here I get an 8x squared. Bring down my 2x, so plus 2x. So again, I'm going to be focusing on my x and my 8x squared. Okay, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. So how many times does x go into 8x squared? X times what gets us 8x squared? Well, that's going to be a plus 8x. So 8x times x is 8x to the second. 8x times a negative 2 is a negative 16x. And then we're going to minus, so that means I'm going to make these opposite because I'm going to change the sign. So that's a negative and this is a positive. And then I'm going to do that math. And when I do that math, this cancels out. This is going to be an 18x, and I'm going to bring down my minus 18. So again, when I'm doing this, I'm focusing on my 18x and my x. That's what I'm focusing on. So I'm focusing on x times what gets me this 18x. And so that is going to be an 18. So I'm going to go plus 18. And so 18 times x is 18x. 18 times a negative 2 is a negative 36. And again, I'm going to minus, so this becomes a negative, this becomes a positive. And when I do that math, negative 18 plus 36 is 18. So this is going to be my remainder. And again, this x minus 2 is not a factor of 4x cubed plus 2x minus 18 because we did not get a remainder of 0. So my answer is going to be the 4x squared plus 8x plus 18, and then this remainder plus 18 over x minus 2. And that is our answer. Okay, on number 3, we're focusing on the 2x into the 6x cubed. So 2x times what gets us 6x cubed, and that's going to be a 3x squared. So I'm going to write it over the x squared term. So 3x squared times 2x is 6x cubed. 3x squared times 3 is a 9x squared. And then we're going to subtract. So when I subtract, this is going to become negative, this is going to become negative. And I am going to combine. All that cancels out here. I get a negative 5x squared. I bring down my negative 2x. And again, what I'm going to do is I am going to focus on this negative 5x squared. That's what I'm going to focus on. So 2x times what gets me a negative 5x squared, and that is not going to be a nice number. So what I can do is I know that 5 divided by 2 is 2.5 or 5 halves. So I'm going to write it as a minus 5 halves x. And then I'm going to multiply. So a negative 5 halves times a positive 2, that's going to have the 2's cancel out, and I get a negative 5x squared. My negative 5 halves x times 3 is a negative 15. Negative 15 halves x. And then I am going to minus. So this becomes a positive, this becomes a positive. I do that math. Now here, this is going to cancel out. Here, this is really a negative 4 halves and a 15 halves, which is an 11 halves x. And we're going to bring down our 7. But you can do that on the calculator if you need to, okay? So if I'm taking a negative 5 halves, I'm going to enter in using my fraction alpha, and y equal gets you a fraction. So negative 5 halves. It's positive 15 halves. I apologize. Positive 15 halves. And a negative 2. So minus 2, and I get 11 halves. So you can also do it on the calculator. And then now I'm going to focus on having that go into 11 halves. So if I take 11 halves divided by 2, half of 11 halves is 11 fourths, okay? And again, you can do that on your calculator. So if I take this and I divide it by 2, you can see it's going to give me 11 fourths, okay? So I am going to add, oops, my pen. I'm going to be adding an 11 fourths. And so 11 fourths times 2x is going to be an 11 halves x. And 11 fourths times 3 is going to be a 33 fourths. Now, when I do this math, this is going to be a 28 fourths. That's what a 7 is. And so when I subtract, this is a negative, this is a negative, these are going to cancel out. I'm going to have a 7, or again, you can think of that as a 28 fourths minus a 33 fourths, which is a negative 5 fourths, and that's my remainder. Again, you can do it on your calculator if you need to. So my final answer is going to be 3x squared minus 5 halves x plus 11 fourths. And now what I would do, instead of giving me this fraction in a fraction, what's going to happen is when this is being divided by this, because again, this remember is going to be on bottom, this is going to end up in this denominator. So I'm going to write it like this, negative 5, and then the 4 times 2x plus 3. Okay, and that's how I'm going to write that, instead of doing a fraction in a fraction. So again, when I have a fraction here that I'm left with, this, when it divides, is going to be multiplying by as a reciprocal, so it's going to end up on bottom, so it's going to end up with a 4. Okay, so next problem. Okay, so number 4, and this one's all set up. Everything is in the right descending order. And so I'm going to be focusing on that 9x cubed. And let me grab. And I'm going to be focusing on my 3x. Okay. So again, I'm going to be focusing on the 3x and the 9x cubed. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. So when I do this, 3x times what gets us a 9x cubed? That is going to be a 3x squared. I multiply 3x squared times 3x is a 9x cubed, minus 3x squared times negative 2 is a negative 6x squared. And then I am going to be subtracting these. So when I do that, this is going to be negative, this is going to be positive, and I'm going to end up having these cancel out. Here I get a 3x squared minus 6x. Again, because I'm bringing down that 6x. So now I'm going to be focusing on this 3x squared, okay? So 3x times what gets me a 3x squared? And that is going to be a plus, a plus x. So x times 3x squared is x times 3x is 3x squared. X times a negative 2 is a negative 2x. And again, I'm going to subtract, so this becomes negative, this becomes positive. I'm going to end up getting a negative 4x. I'm going to bring this down, minus 17. And so now I'm going to be focusing on, oops, not that whole thing. So now I'm going to be focusing on this negative 4x. So x times what gets me a negative 4x? And so again, you can take negative 4 divided by 3. That's going to give you a negative 4/3. That's what I'm multiplying by, a negative 4/3. So negative 4/3 times 3x is a negative 4x. A negative 4/3 times a negative 2 is a positive 8/3. And then I'm going to subtract, so that becomes a plus, this becomes a minus. And so let me do this on my calculator. So I'm going to be having a negative 17 minus, and I'm going to do alpha and y equal to get my fraction. Okay, and I want number 1, or just hit enter. And I'm going to type in my 8/3, and I get a negative 59/3. So I'm going to end up getting a negative 59/3 as my remainder. Sorry, let me get that in the screen, negative 59/3. So I'm going to rewrite my answer. This is going to be a 3x squared plus x minus 4 plus x minus 4/3. And then this minus 59/3, I'm going to write it as a minus 59 over 3 times 3x minus 2. And that's going to be my answer. Okay, so on number 5, it looks like I'm missing actually 2 terms here. I don't have an x cubed and I don't have an x. I'm going to have a 0 there. So this is going to be x minus 1 into 3x to the 4th minus 7x. I already forgot to put that there, didn't I? So don't forget to put your plus 0x to the 3rd minus 7x squared, and then plus 0x plus 5. Okay. And so I'm going to have x and into this 3x to the 4th. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. So when I do that, x times what gets me 3x to the 4th? That is going to be a 3x to the 3rd. So I'm going to put it over my thirds. 3x to the 3rd times x is a 3x to the 4th. 3x cubed minus times a negative 1 is a negative 3x to the 3rd. And then I'm going to subtract. So this is negative, this is plus, and this cancels out. Here I'm going to get a 3x to the 3rd. I'm going to bring down my minus 7x squared. And now I'm going to be focusing on the 3x to the 3rd. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. So let me just move this up a little bit. Okay. So x times what gets me 3x to the 3rd? So that's going to be a positive 3x squared. So that's going to be a 3x to the 3rd minus a 3x to the 2nd. I am going to subtract, so that's going to be a negative. This is going to be a positive. And I'm going to end up having this cancel out. This is going to give me a negative 4x squared. A negative 4x squared. Bring down my x, so plus 0x. And so now I'm focusing on x into this negative 4x squared. That's what I'm focusing on. So x times negative 4x will give me a negative 4x squared. Okay, so again, I'm going to get a negative 4x squared. And then negative 4x times a negative 1 is a positive 4x. I'm going to subtract, so that's going to be a plus. This is going to be a minus. And so when I do that math, I am going to get a negative 4x, bring down my 5. Okay, positive 5. So now, again, I'm going to focus, I'm going to focus on my negative 4x. So x times what gets me a negative 4x? Let me just kind of shrink this out a little bit more. And also on my screen. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is x times what gets me a negative 4x, so that's going to be a negative 4. So negative 4 times x is a negative 4x. Negative 4 times negative 1 is a positive 4. I'm going to change my signs because I'm going to minus, so that's a plus. This is a minus. I end up with a 1. So my final answer is going to be, I'm going to write it here, 3x to the third. 3x to the third. I'll get it in the screen. So 3x to the third plus 3x squared minus 4x minus 4. And then I have this 1, so that's going to be plus 1 over x minus 1. And that is going to be my answer. And on number 6, okay, it looks like for this one, I am just missing an x term. So I'm going to have x plus 5 into, okay, so x plus 5 into x to the 4th. I'm going to shrink this a little bit so we can see the x to the 4th minus 7x to the 3rd minus x squared plus 0x plus 1. Okay. And so I am going to be focusing on x into x to the 4th. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. So x times what gets us x to the 4th. So that is going to be x times x to the 3rd. So this is going to be an x to the 3rd. And then I'm going to multiply these together. So I'm going to have x to the 3rd times x is x to the 4th. X to the 3rd times 5 is a 5x to the 3rd. And then I'm going to minus. So this becomes negative, this becomes negative. I end up getting this canceling out. Here, I get a negative 12x to the 3rd. I bring down my negative x squared. And now I'm going to be asking myself, okay, I'm going to be focusing on x into the negative 12x to the 3rd. So when I'm doing that, x times what gets me a negative 12x to the 3rd, that's going to be a negative 12x squared. I multiply that together, I get a negative 12x to the 3rd, and negative 12x squared times 5 is a negative 60x squared. I'm going to subtract. So this is a plus, this is a plus, and I'm going to have this cancel out. Here, I'm going to get a 59x squared. I'm going to bring down my 0x. And now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to be focusing on that x into this 59x squared. That's going to be my focus. And so x times what gets me 59x squared, that's going to be plus 59x. So I'm going to do that multiplication. I'm going to get a 59x squared. And when I do 59 times 5, I end up with a 295. So that's going to be plus 295x. And then I'm going to subtract. So this is a negative, this is a negative. And so this is going to cancel out, and here I'm going to get a negative 295x, and then I'm going to bring down my plus 1, and again I'm going to focus on my 50 into my negative 295x. So that is going to be x times a negative 295. So it's going to be negative 295x. And when I, whoops, forgot my 5 here, didn't I? 295x. And then I'm going to take 295 times 5, and I end up with 1475. So that's going to be a negative 1475. I am going to subtract. And so when I do that subtraction, this becomes a plus and this becomes a plus. I end up having that cancel out, and here I get 1,476 as a remainder. So my answer, I read it in pink, is going to be x, whoops, grab shape by mistake, is going to be x to the third minus 12x squared plus 59x minus 295. And here I'm going to move this because I always like to live on the edge when I'm doing these problems, don't I? Okay, so I'm going to move it over here. Okay, and then plus my remainder. So plus, and I'm going to write it down here, plus 1476 over x plus 5. So this is going to be our answer. Okay, so hopefully you find that helpful. You got to remember that when you do this, you always need to make sure that that lead you get rid of. So if it happens to not go in evenly, like the one that we were doing, and I want to say number 3, you have to make sure that you're either multiplying by a fraction or a decimal for that, so that it goes in evenly.